All right, we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. So, for those that are watching offline, one of the things that we often do is kind of collect questions from people and we get people logged in. So, those people watching offline, what you could do is actually maybe fast forward to about 10 minutes and we'll get started. So, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, feel free to just tell us where you're from, where you're watching on the where you're watching the Hangout, and we'll go ahead through some different questions that are submitted. So we'll let people get logged in. If you have a particular topic, you could enter it in the comments field, or you could always, for future Hangouts, you could always email to ClubCubase at Steinberg.net. So just go ahead and get online here. So, all right, we have some people introducing themselves. My name is Greg Ondo. I'm presenting from Northern Virginia today. So we'll be going through, I'll be the host for the Hangout today, and we'll go ahead and get started in a couple minutes. But please feel free to introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and then we'll go ahead and get started in just a couple minutes. And once again, if you have questions or topics that you want covered, please feel free to go ahead and just ask them in the comments field. We'll start collecting some of the questions that come in. We had some questions on click tracks, chord pads, as well as some other topics for doing offsets on the main project window. What's the best way of doing that? And some media bay questions. So we'll go ahead and get through those. We see more people are getting logged in as we talk. So let's go ahead and if you have questions, again, please feel free to enter them in the comments field. Okay, so we have some questions coming in. People from India, Portland, Oregon, other places. Good to see Sal on the Hangout. All right, from Croatia, Norway, Poland. It's all great. Once again, we'll just, if you have questions, please feel free to go ahead and make comments on that. Okay, so questions coming in, just copying them over. Okay, so he has questions coming in. I'm just kind of copying these over. And more people are getting logged in. All right, people from Chicago in-house. Okay, just copying over questions. Once again, if you have questions, please feel free to go ahead and enter them in. People from Houston logging in. Okay, so questions on East-West Play integration. All right, some more copying questions over. Thanks for all the great questions. Some questions on recording MIDI in. Questions on sampler track. All right, so people from Ireland, we'll go ahead, just keep collecting questions here for another minute or two, and we'll get started. Okay, just copying in some more questions are coming in. Thanks everyone for great questions. I'm just going back through some of the questions came in. We'll get started. I'm just copying them over into my text document so I keep track. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. We have some questions that were mailed in advance, in addition to all these comments. We'll try to get through all the different questions and comments that are coming in today. And just see if there's any more that come in before we get started that I can copy over. Okay, so we'll go ahead. We have some more questions coming in. Sorry, just... All right, more questions and questions. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. One of the questions that was mailed in was, how do I change the click track sample? So if there's a click track, so when we actually kind of start with Cubase, let me just hide one thing on my screen. So one of the elements that we see when working with the click track inside of Cubase is that we actually, if we just hit the letter C, this will kind of turn on our click track. And it's a click track that kind of cuts through a lot of different mixes. Drummers often like it because they could hear the click, and it doesn't kind of blend in with other drum and percussion sounds. But sometimes people may be used to using something perhaps like a Uri click or using MIDI samples. So if you wanted to use MIDI samples, all you'd have to do is, you see the metronome set up here. And if you actually just double click, at this point you could route it out to virtual instruments. So if you wanted that to go out to Groove Agent or to Hallian Sonic, or any virtual instrument. You could have that. So a lot of people may be used to using like rim shots for different MIDI sounds. But one of the things that we could also do is if you actually click on sounds here, here you could actually load up your own samples. So I think I downloaded some samples of like a Yuri click. So if I come here, we go to wave files, and I'll just choose a quick click sample, and I could use that for, and then if I wanted to, I could have kind of my high and low. So now instead of playing back the beeps that we're used to having, I can now switch this to sounds, and then as soon as I hit OK, so at that point you could just easily change the click track to play back different sounds as you desire, and you could take any sample you want. So if you have a favorite rim shot, some people like the Yuri click, but all you have to do is go into the metronome settings, and you could do that directly from the transport menu. I believe it's in the transport menu. You'll see the metronome setup, or just by, I think it's control double click, or on a Mac command double click on the metronome icon from the transport bar. And then at that point, you could switch it to sounds and direct it to a standard WAV file. So there's a number of different click track WAV files that I'm sure people would be able to find online to go through and answer that. All right, one other question that was mailed in was people wanting to have a offset in the bars. So if we actually kind of start here, we could say we wanted a little bit of information before measure 1 starts, or if we want the project to start on 0 or -1. And this kind of often goes back to maybe some older MIDI workings where people would send a number of sysx dumps or program changes before starting the file. So before starting the project, and they may need a little bit of time. But if you need to do a bar offset, all you'd have to do is to just literally come here, and we could go to our project menu, or we could go directly here to our project setup. So as soon as I wanted to come here, we now would select our project and go to project setup. And then right here you would see bar offset. So if you have that set to 0, everything would start at measure 1. Or if you have it set to -1, you could have it, if you have a bar offset. So you could just simply adjust directly there. So if you needed to have a negative bar before your part started, we could do that. Or again, just come here to your project menu, to project setup. If I don't click on the wrong thing this time. So again, project, to project setup. And then at that point, you could just set that to be 0, and you can see that the bar offset will automatically carry over just like that. So an easy way to have kind of different measures offset if you need to have value start before bar 1. Just copy over a couple of our questions, read through some of the comments. Okay, so a question that just came up: can you shift a chord track up by half steps? So I'll just go ahead and let me go ahead and revert this project so you can see it a little better. So once again, the question is shifting the chord track by half steps. So let's say in this we have a particular chord track here. Let me just make the chord track a little larger and more obvious to see, and we'll make it larger here. So if I wanted to select my chords here, let's say I just wanted to, and I think we could just do a select all events on selected tracks. And then you'll just see right here the root key. But if you actually just come here, so we see we're kind of in the key of C, and just I'm using my mouse scroll wheel. And this way you could just simply transpose going up or down all the chords within a chord track. So pretty simple, but make sure that all the events are selected, and from the info line, just using your mouse scroll wheel, just simply change, and then that way you can modulate. So if you have a whole progression in the singer, it's a little too high, you could easily just kind of drop everything to be a half step or whole step down as needed. Okay, so we had a question. If I play a keyboard part in Cubase 9, a note right on the beat, it ends up defaulting to a 16th note ahead of the grid. Any ideas why? One of the things to be aware of is when you go to your record setup, one of the things, there could be a couple different things. One is there's a preference for recording. Let me see if we can find it quickly. Where you could, snap MIDI parts, and there's one setting where it can actually just kind of snap it directly to the left locator for MIDI. So you could have one thing that it could be is perhaps an auto quantize setting. So if you go to under transport, this is moved around several different times, but let's say MIDI record modes, make sure that the auto quantize in record isn't checked, because if it's just a fraction of a beat early, just make sure that, once again, you go to transport to MIDI record modes and make sure that the auto quantize in record is not checked, and see if that does the trick for you. Those would be the things that I would look for first. All right, so we had a question on a Behringer control surface and how to get that configured directly inside of Cubase to be functioning. So probably what you want to do, and this could be not the most subtle thing, but if you go to the device setup, and I believe that works as a Mackie control device, but what you want to do is, and this isn't the most intuitive part, but if you actually just come here and say, I want to have my Mackie control. So click on the plus sign in the upper left-hand corner. Click on the plus sign here. You want to add a Mackie control. So if you just kind of come here, so choose Mackie control. And then what you need to do is to choose which MIDI ports it's connected to. So if you have it connected via USB, you may see like a Behringer MIDI driver. And it's probably going to be the same port for the input and the output. So you'd want to just simply set that up there. If you're using MIDI in and out from the device, you could also just define what MIDI interface you're actually using, and then at that point you can just simply have it configured. So once again, to add a control surface, it's kind of like a Mackie control compliant. Go to your device menu, to device setup, click on the plus sign, select Mackie control, and then make sure that the correct MIDI communication port where that is connected to your computer is defined, and then you should be all set with that. Just reading through some of the comments and questions coming in. All right, so we have some questions on removing a VST instrument track. Let me just kind of read through those. I think it might be perhaps in a group track or a folder. So let me just go ahead and read through it to make sure I'm going to answer the questions correctly. All right, so we have a question, how to delete a VST instrument track within a folder track. So let me go ahead and just create that scenario here. I'll do a new project. Just create an empty project here. So we'll add an instrument track. Let's just do like a Groove Agent SE. And we'll add one more instrument track. So something for Hanging Sonic SE. All right, and with these two, let's add some audio tracks. Why not? And one quick way, a lot of people always miss this, how to create folder tracks, is to actually just right click after tracks are selected and say move selected tracks to new folder. So here we can see our Vst Instrument Rack. We have our Groove Agent SE, our Hanging Sonic SE. And let me just try to just remove that selected track. So it seems to, if you just right click there just to select remove selected tracks, I have my Hanging Sonic SE, that we could just simply do it like that. So just right click. Now sometimes people, I see some confusion, and this could be perhaps a little counterintuitive, or if you have an instrument rack, let's say for loop mash, we'll just add loop mash as an instrument track. So I'll go ahead and move these within the folder here. So if I have my Groove Agent SE, and let's say I wanted to switch instruments or get rid of it from the rack itself, one of the tricks you could do is just click on the name and then choose no VST instrument. And then at that point, the track that was there will still be there. If you wanted to delete the track and the instrument tracks are kind of always associated with that. But let's go ahead and try the loop mash, since that's an instrument rack. All right, so we've already kind of moved that. So if I remove the selected track, again, right click. Since it's an instrument rack, that'll still be there. And then at that point, as soon as you go to no VST instrument, you'll see that those components will just kind of disappear. So if I misunderstood your question, please just leave a comment back in the field, in the comments field, and then we could go through that again. All right, here's a question. Can you change the key of a project all at once, or do you need to go track by track? So let's say if I wanted to come here, one of the features that's kind of, it's not necessarily from a major to a minor, but if you wanted to transpose, let's say if I have a project like this, say a classical piece, one of the track classifications that you have is what's called, we could right click on our track list and we could add one that's called the transpose track, sorry. So while I'm playing, if I wanted to now just come here, we can click and say I just wanted to transpose at certain points of the piece. At this point, I could just say, okay, let's just transpose. Click there, and I'm just going to use my mouse scroll wheel to set the value. So I'll double click here. Let's say from the original key, then I'll go up. So we just modulated all the pieces of the music to that. Then we're going to go down 4. Right at that point. So that's actually just kind of transposing. And we'll have it go back to our home key. Let's say here, let's go up. So at that point, you could just kind of have the entire project transposed. Now, something to be aware of, if not all of your tracks transpose, by default, I believe that they'll be kind of set to transpose, but they could also be locked from the info line. But all you have to do is, again, add a track, and you want to add a transpose track, and then you could just simply take and kind of change the pitch of music very easily and change the keys. Again, it won't necessarily change keys from like a major to a minor, but it will allow you to kind of drop it by semitones as well. So. Just reading through some other questions are coming in. Thanks everyone for the wonderful questions. So we had a question, just more of a comment. Where do we find all of these hidden features in Cubase? Most of them are kind of in the manual, actually. I always kind of, go through and read through different parts. But, that's why we do these Hangouts, because sometimes the manual may show you what something does, but, having a creative application for it, the manual may not do that as expected. But if you have, questions, that's why we do these Hangouts, to help people out. All right, so I see a comment, why answer is always the stuff that's been done before. So we're going to get through all the questions that we can. So if you just have patience, we're going through as many as we can, people that were sent in. So. Okay, so we have a question. I want to be able to move the cursor. Let me just reread this. I want to be able to move the cursor by clicking anywhere in the arranger section rather than clicking the upper toolbar to move the cursor head. Any way to customize this or set it up? So there is a preference to be aware of. Let me see if I could dig it up here, where to do, I think, just this behavior. So a lot of people may notice that they always have to kind of be here to click. But I think if we go here, let's look at preferences. Let me dig through this. Might be under editing. Let me just look for this one particular. It's something like clicking on empty spaces. Just see if it's maybe under transport. Okay, so under transport, you can say locate when clicked in empty space. So now that you do that, you can kind of click anywhere here just to move the particular cursor position without always having to be at top. So if you go again, preferences, and under transport, locate when clicked in empty space. So I think if you give that a try, that will do what you want to accomplish. Okay, so I think we're getting some more clarification on a question about moving the VST instrument folder. So I think what you need to do is just to remove the instrument from the rack, and that will do the trick for you. Okay, reading through some questions here. So so just if you remove the instrument rack, just like we did. Okay, so we have a question. Can we show how to fully delete or remove a tempo track? So I haven't tried this. So I think the project may always have a tempo track visible. it may be part of it, but if you want to remove all the data in the tempo track, you could come here and if you wanted to go to select all on the selected track and then hit delete, there will be no data in your tempo track, but just like every project has a play and stop functionality, you could, it's kind of inherent part of the tempo. So you may just have to delete the information within the tempo track, but every project will have a tempo track. So if you, again, just come here and select the track and then right click to select all on selected tracks, at that point, that'll select all the events and then you could just hit delete and that should do the trick for you. So let me know if that works for you. If not, just just leave a comment in the field if you need more info on that. All right. Well, it looks like the locate when clicked in empty space did the trick. Glad you found that. So yes, Cubase can do it as well as other programs. All right, we had a question about setting up kind of loop points, and I believe the question was for 8.0. So what we have is within a particular project, one of the things you could do is set up not only like a loop point here. So let's say if I just have this part set up, I'll do just a little bit of a loop here. So say I just have this set to loop. Say really bad loop, all right. So if I wanted, so we could have this, and sometimes when you're rehearsing with people, one of the things that you do, and I believe this was implemented in, not in 8, but in version 8.5, was this concept of loop points or punch points. So if I wanted to have a loop, but still have punch points that were independent, I could just kind of grab my range selection tool here. And let's say I just wanted to add a quick audio track. And as we add the audio track, what I want to do now is go to transport. And one of the things that was kind of, we could go to punch points. And what I want to do is actually set the punch points from the selection. So I could actually just put in Shift-I, Shift-O to put in my punch points. And once we have that, we see these little red punch points. And when I go to record, instead of the punch in and punch out being tied directly to the actual left and right locators, what this will allow me to do is, let's say I'll just start it here before or cycle. Then now I'll just hit play. It's going to go back. And now it's going to punch in. And again, punch out. And still be independent of the actual left and right locators. So once again, you would do that just by going to transport, and then you would see punch points. I like to define a range with the range selection tool and just say set punch points to selection range. But I think the original question was in 8.0, and that feature was implemented in 8.5 and higher versions of the program. So let me know if you have any questions on that, and we'll be happy to discuss a little further. Okay, reading through some of the comments coming in. Okay, we have a question. How can I get my personal VST instruments like Absinthe to be in the media bay on the right zone along with the Steinberg VST instruments? I asked about this when I was in Germany last, and they're kind of aware of the issue, so I think we may see it coming. I know that the developers are cognizant that people want this, but currently it's just going to be fixed directly to the Steinberg instruments. So sorry about that. Just reading through some of the comments that are coming in. Okay, so I think this is a question regarding the tempo track and deleting the data. So once again, what I'm doing, it's not a delete menu, but when I come here to this selected track, just to clarify, I want to select that track, go to edit, and then to again select all, or I'll just go to edit, or I'm sorry, right click to select all unselected tracks. So once again, if I do it correctly this time, and then I just hit the delete key on my computer keyboard. That's what I'm doing. So I'm not looking for an actual delete menu, but just hitting the delete key. So I hope that's clearer. Sorry for the confusion. So we see, is there a way to better implement vocal line for quicker use in Cubase or Nuendo that have integrated for the quicker use? I know some people use it for kind of the offline process history, but I think, I know that our developers are kind of aware of the issue. So I think we might see some solutions coming. I would imagine there's been a lot of people that have requested it in different surveys. So I know our developers are aware of having that functionality. I would like to have it too. So. Okay, so I'm going to go to my text document, make sure we get through some of these questions as well. Hope everyone's learning a couple tips and tricks. Just scroll through, we have a couple pages of questions. So we had a question that was emailed in. It says, in the media bay, I can see an add remove button. How do I rescan the file system to make my user presets from 7.5 available in 9? So one of the things that the media bay, once you open it up, by default, you may notice that this little left column may be disabled. So if you go to the lower left-hand corner and click here, you'll be able to activate the left-hand pane icon. So as soon as you do that, that is now where you could choose to rescan for your user contents just by kind of right-clicking here and choosing to rescan the disk. So as you work on that, So once again, go to the lower left-hand corner, and there's a little setup window, and then just make sure that that this right here is actually checked. And if that's not checked, you don't see it, and then I think that'll make sense for you. So let's go ahead through some of our questions that were mailed in. So we had a questions about the chord tracks, and I know the Cubase can translate basic MIDI chords into, for instance, jazzy voicings by means of the chord editing in the inspector. And I think question was, is there an easy way? And they found this kind of inspirational, coming up with more interesting chord progressions. And is there a way to kind of take this simple chord and have it automatically play back the more complex chord or more interesting chord voicing? One of the things that can be done, and there isn't a way to kind of automatically turn like a basic triad into really interesting jazz chords automatically. But if we kind of jump here, let's open up this project. And one of the cool things that you can do is kind of, a lot of people don't understand that you could, do a lot of this with chord pads. So we'll give you just kind of an idea, some of the stuff we could do with chord pads selected. And we just revert this really quickly. So my known starting point. All right. It always plays that chord when you start. Okay, so if I wanted to switch to my chord pad, so I just did I have a chord track here, and then what I wanted to do was for the chord track, if I wanted the chord track to be carried over directly into the chord pads below, at this point we could just kind of, you could actually just save different chord track presets. But one of the things that you could also do is just to basically assign pads from the chord track. So if you have the chord pad, the chord track kind of used, you can now just assign those chords directly to the chord track. And if I wanted to listen, and these, since this looks like a MIDI keyboard, what it is in essence is doing is actually, you could just trigger different MIDI notes here. So I'm going to turn on, let's say, my virtual keyboard. And I noticed that someone had mentioned that in 902.0 that the keyboard shortcut Alt-K doesn't work. So I just noticed that like 5 minutes before the Hangout. I'll pass that on. But you could always kind of right click here. So let's say if I have my string part selected, I can now just play just by hitting one MIDI note. So if I actually wanted to just, record those different parts, I could just kind of place my Cubase into record. So I'll just come right here, place it into record. And if you want to try different chord voicings for that, same chord. So I'm hitting one MIDI note, and then it's actually going to be recording that data. So you could have different voicings and different chords kind of all spelled out here and trigger it from one MIDI note. It's not playing a simple chord and translating that over. But if you don't have great keyboard skills, and I fall into that category, this is kind of an easy way of doing it. Now, one thing that a lot of people miss is this concept also of sections. So right now we have it where you could do plain chords. So when I trigger a MIDI note, it's just going to play like a block chord. But within the chord pads themselves, we can go to sections. And what this will allow me to do is I could use other MIDI notes. So I just start right here on the G, and so I could hit G, A, B, C. I could hit, and now I could kind of play the individual notes within a chord just by hitting these 4 keys, the G, A, B, C, right next to each other. So I could switch the chords with one MIDI note and play the voices within that chord. So if you need to experiment with some different chord ideas, using the chord pads and sections might be helpful with that. So, all right, so let's go ahead and I'll just go through some of your questions. Okay, question is, can we rename WAV audio files directly from Cubase and have the changes show up in the WAV files themselves? So let's go ahead and do this. So let's do a new project. I'll just do empty. And let's say I was like really lazy about naming tracks. So say I have the classic audio 0, 1, 2, 3. All right. And then I went to record. So ideally, everyone wants to name the tracks before you record, but it doesn't always happen. So let's say I recorded my tracks here. And now I have tracks named audio 0, 1 underscore 0, 1, audio 0, 2. So if you wanted to rename this, all you'd have to do is to just come here and say in the info line, I think we just come here. You could just select the event here. And then right under the file name, and then you see that that shows up directly in a WAV file as well. So just select the event on the info line, and from there you could just right here on the left hand side under file, just rename the different events. All right, just going through some of the comments that are coming in. Thanks everyone for the great comments and questions. Great to see David Reuter on. Okay, so I think going back to the question on the rack. So let's say going back to the VST instruments. So as soon as we get to our VST instruments here, let's say if it's in the rack instrument, like our Hallian Sonic SE. So we'll go ahead and create that. We see our folder that's been created here. So we see our, under VST instruments, we have our Hallian Sonic SE. So again, you just click here and choose no VST instrument. And then that folder will disappear for that instrument that's been loaded up in the rack. So see if that does a trick for you. All right, let's go back. So we're just going in between two different computers here at once. All right, so we had a question on is there is there a key command shortcut that could be applied to the project arrange window in Cubase Pro 9? I looked but didn't see anything. For example, if I had only one monitor and the project arrange window was hidden behind the mix console, it would be very handy if you could recall each window with key commands or tab or something like that under the devices menu. So let's go ahead and kind of recreate that. So let's say if I come here, I have this. You could always go to the Windows menu, and at this point, you could just see your different key commands. But one thing you could also do is to save workspaces. So if I wanted to add a workspace, and you could actually add workspaces for global that can be used in all projects or just for a particular project. So let's say I just want to see a range. So at this point, we could just go to your workspace, and then you could organize a range. And let's say now I wanted to see my mixer. So again, we can add a workspace and say mixer. So at this point, you could just go to your different, directly here. So if you want to see more, we could actually just kind of say, okay, here's my range view. And you could set up key commands for those. So, so you could definitely just kind of work through workspaces. And then I think that will make sense for allowing you to quickly recall the project window from a key command. All right, got some more questions that we were sent in. So let's go through the list. Thanks everyone for wonderful questions. All right, so it says when you drag an audio file that you slice in the DAW sequencer zone and drag it to Groove Agent, SE or 4, and do not want samples not to overlap, so you set poly to 1 and mute group to 1. It doesn't work. So let me open up. I think I have a project where we might have something. See if this has. Okay, so I'll just. All right, so just kind of reread the question here silently so I don't bore everyone. So just out of curiosity, are you always, so a question about kind of slicing loops within the DAW, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but if I come here, let's say if I have, my drum loop set up here, and right now I don't have it sliced, but I could go to my slice menu under edit, and we'll create the slices. So I'm just curious if maybe you could reiterate if you're always slicing it outside of the DAW, or if you're slicing the drum loop for the question that was asked inside of Groove Agent SE. All right, so we had a question. Can you do vocoder in the box in Cubase 9? There isn't a vocoder plugin that ships with Cubase 9. There are a lot of different third-party plugins, but there isn't one that specifically comes with Cubase Pro 9 or Cubase 9. So question, is it possible to create a macro that adds a specific VST instrument that I chose? I'm not sure. We'll take a quick look and see if we could figure it out. So just creating our empty project. Okay, let me just load up quick kit here just to make sure. I'm not sure if there's a way of adding a specific instrument, but let me just take a quick look through key commands. I think you could have it automatically open the browser, but I don't think there's a way to actually add a particular instrument via a macro. So you could open up kind of the instrument in the media bay to see all the instruments, but I don't know of a way. I could play around with it some, but I don't know way off the top of my head. So sorry about that. So we have a question. Hi, you saved some presets made with East-West Play VST2 version in VST preset format. Can I load them from Media Bay to play VST3 version without resaving them? I don't have East-West Play currently. If those it's really up to kind of how the Play engine, if it reads those particular VST presets, there's a good chance that it may. I've seen some instruments do that when they get updated, but it really depends on what the developers of that particular instrument have done. Some of it will automatically carry over, and sometimes it may be a new thing. So it really depends on the actual software plugin and how that's been implemented. So you could kind of check. You might have to try it out. I don't have a version to test with, unfortunately. So I would love to, but all right. Let me go through some more questions. I'm just going to read through some of the comments, make sure I'm not missing something. Okay, so once again, we're going back to removing the VST instrument question and removing the folder. So if I do this here, let me just close this out. So I'm going to add a VST instrument rack. Now, if we watch this right now, let's say I'll unload my VST instrument track. So I'll just choose. So right here on this, I could right click and let's say remove selected tracks, and that's going to get rid of the VST instrument. So the question was, and kind of maybe clarifying this, is he's unable to find the way the VST folder track was added. So as soon as I go to add my VST instrument rack, let's say Italian Sonic SE, as soon as that instrument is loaded up, you can see that this rack is turned on and created as soon as the instrument is loaded up. So now if we wanted to create a MIDI track that's independent of that, so now we see that. So we see that the output channels, and that's how the VST instrument rack works. But now as soon as I choose no VST instrument, the MIDI channel I believe will stay, but the audio output channel of the VST instrument should go away when we choose no VST instrument. And just like that. So it's created every time that you load up an instrument in the instrument rack, and that's what's causing it to be created. So I hope that's clear. If not, just leave another comment in the field, and I'd be happy to kind of discuss it a little further. Okay, so we have a question. Can I explain add text notes in track, please, if it's possible, in Cubase, please? Okay, so yeah, this is a great feature that's found in Cubase. So if I wanted to come here, one of the things that you have is a notepad on every single track. So let's say, and one of the things that's really tough in a lot of studios and sessions, and especially sessions that are going to be shared, and you know, people are recording different parts of the project in their particular studio, is actual kind of, you know, one of the things that used to always be with kind of traditional, you know, professional studios, one of the things that was always really critical was the track sheet. So let's say if I have some audio tracks here. So let's say I have 16 tracks. So one of the things that's really helpful is you have your track sheet here. And these you could actually just leave little notes. So if you say, okay, I just wanted to, this is a kick drum, and you could say like, okay, AKG D112 in drum. And you could actually just kind of leave notes for each track as you do this. So let's say, okay, I wanted to go to my snare, and you can say this is SM57 on top. And you can say maybe the next track will be SM57 bottom mic phase inverted. So this way you could actually kind of see these different, you know, descriptions of what's going on in that particular track. Now this can also carry directly over when you go into your devices menu and you look at the main mix console. So let's say I just wanted to go to my mix console here. Now one of the when we go to our racks, one of the things that you can actually add here is, so let's say I choose my racks, you know, or let me just come right over here. So you can choose kind of your different components here. So let's say I just wanted to see all of these. And one of the things also kind of in the setup window, let me just, it moved recently. So if you actually look here, so if you click on this little icon in Cubase 9, if you're on earlier versions, it's over on the left-hand side. Here you could actually have your Notepad data visible within the track itself, and also pictures. So here, as you're tracking, you could just leave, notes to yourself so that you don't forget, and you could actually document your session. Now, there's also a way where you could add pictures. So if you wanted to just simply come over here, you could actually add different track pictures. And I don't think, and we had a question about adding kind of multiple track pictures simultaneously. I've never tried it. We'll give it a try. All right, so it looks like it does work. All right, so, and here you could have like track pictures, and this is kind of loaded in the same area. So you could have different track pictures as well as your notepads visible within the mix console. Now, if you wanted to add, if I select a number of different channels here, and let's say these are all synthesizers or whatever, you could now just click here. And once you have quick link turned on, now click and you can say, okay, this is, piano parts. So you could add it to multiple pictures directly to that, as long as, or let's say we'll add percussion and then hit OK. So at this point, you could actually add multiple track pictures simultaneously. So there's another question that had come in. Now, with the notepads, so you can see this here. Now, something else that's useful if you're giving your project to someone that doesn't have Cubase, you could just come directly here and export the notepad data as a text file. So that way, every single track can show, that information can be kind of passed along to people that aren't smart enough to be running Cubase yet. But again, so you can add notepad data directly here in the inspector. That will carry over into your mixer view. In Cubase 9, if you click here, you could choose to see pictures or notepad data if you want to. So that could always be part of your mixer. So as you're doing mixes, you could say, I recorded this vocal to make the singer happy and move on to the next song or whatever. So you could leave personal notes for yourself and just kind of have, or kind of track section documentation, but you just want to make sure that that's visible. And just by checking notepad and pictures, and if you wanted to add multiple pictures to, tracks simultaneously, just make sure that the quick link is enabled. And then you could just simply select a number of tracks and add pictures just like that. So, the notepad data will, be a great help to, just keeping track of sessions and for session management and organization. All right, just going through some more comments that are coming in. All right, so we had a question. How do we get the keyboard to show up on the transport panel? So one of the quick ways of doing it is to just right click on a transport. And this is with kind of the older transport. So right click and check or uncheck virtual keyboard. All right, so we had a question on kind of track visibility. Let me read through that. Okay, so someone says, I like the hide selected track option. It helps to keep sessions clean, but how can I show it again? Or how can I show all hidden tracks? So one of the things is that a lot of people miss is this visibility option. This was introduced originally in Cubase 7 and within the mix console. And then I think it was 7.5 or maybe 8, they added the capability of doing it on the project window. So let's say if there's a number of different tracks that had data on them, but maybe some were just kind of like you're keeping it just in case, but you don't necessarily want to see it, you could actually just kind of click here and hide particular tracks. So just clicking directly there, you can hide those particular tracks. So you say, I only want to see drums, or I only want to see, these are just my vocals. Now you could actually save these. So let's say I just wanted to see these are vocal tracks. So if you click on configuration, we could add configuration and we'll just call them vocals. And let's say I want to see only my tracks that were drums. So I could add a configuration here. So we'll just click on add configuration and we'll call it drums. So then if I wanted to just look at my vocal tracks, my drum tracks, you could just simply toggle back and forth. Now, if you wanted to see all tracks, you could just simply, there's some preset settings here. So one of the presets, so if you see kind of your configurations, just to the right of that, there's some handy presets. So one of them is just show all tracks. Or again, you could just simply go right here. Now, one of the helpful things is this can also be integrated with the mixer as well. So if you click here, you could actually sync the project visibility and the mix console. So if I have my mix console open here, as I select my different components here, so I just go to my vocals, and now I go to my console, I only see those particular channels that are selected. Now there's some other really handy presets in here. Let me open up a project just to kind of illustrate one of them. See if we get the annoying little chord that plays. Okay, so let's say I have parts of my project going in and out over time, but all of a sudden I hear something weird right at this very moment, but not all the tracks are playing back. So one of the options is where you can say, show tracks that only have data at the cursor position, and that will automatically hide all the tracks that aren't actually playing any data where the cursor is. And again, you could just come here to show all tracks. If you're a composer and you have a large template, so it's not uncommon, I've seen some templates of up to 3,200 tracks from some heavyweight composers. But if you have parts of the project that aren't being actually used, like let's say of your 3,200 tracks, you're only using 1,600. At that point, you could say show tracks that only have data that only have data between locators, or show tracks that, if they don't have any information on it, you could just simply hide the track as well. So if I come here, let's say if I added, a number, let's say 7 audio tracks, and if there's no data on those parts at all, you could just click here, and now it'll just hide those particular tracks just that easily. So again, if you wanted to just go to the visibility settings here, you could see all of your different tracks. But just to the right of where it says configure, if you click on configurations, you can add your own configurations, and they can be recallable from keyboard shortcuts. And then you have kind of different scenario preset options directly to the right of the word configurations. So if you quickly wanted to show all tracks, you could do that very easily. So I think that should help. Go on to some other questions. Okay, so we had a question, and we get this question in most Hangouts, and this also is kind of asked in two different ways. Is there a way to use 32-bit VST plugins? I assume that this is with Cubase Pro 9 or Cubase 9 level. So with Cubase 9, we stopped including our 32-bit plugin bridge, and this kind of can affect plugins. Like people had asked about the older Virtual Guitarist that has been discontinued now for almost probably 10 years, but still a great plugin. So people want to be able to use some of their 32-bit plugins that were unique and probably won't be updated. So if you have 32-bit plugins, you can still purchase a third-party bridge. I think a lot of people use JBridge and find that it works well. Realize that one of the reasons that Steinberg switched to getting rid of the 32-bit bridge is because it really does affect the overall program stability. So be cognizant of that. But if you have a very specialized tool, just run JBridge, and that will still allow you to bridge the plugins. So that's a solution. Also, I'm sure that my friends at Wizu or the company that developed the original Virtual Guitarist, they also have new versions of the Virtual Guitarist as well. I think if you go to virtualguitarist.com, you could check that out, and those are fully 64-bit. But if you need to run 32-bit plugins still for, the one plugin that's just like, oh, it's such an essential part of my workflow, kind of like how, I see that a lot with like the original Virtual Guitarist, just simply go out and purchase JBridge, and that will still work for you. So. Okay, so we had a question. I bought Hallian 6. Can I load the VST presets from MediaBay directly to Hallian 6 instead of having Hallian Sonic 3 open by default? They're saved as Hallian Sonic presets in MediaBay. I think probably if you go here, one way which may make it work for you, because Hallian Sonic 3 is really kind of a subset of features, kind of like the playback engine of the full Hallian 6. But if you just kind of start here, and let's say if you are in MediaBay, if you come here, one of the things you could do is to actually kind of specify the instrument. So let me just say, so let's say my first column here, let me just, just do it in the sound browser here really quick. But here, if you choose, perhaps, if you go to the plugin name, and then at this point, just choose Hallion 6. That I think that will probably do the trick for you. So if you search within Hallion 6, so I think that will also show up there, but I would have to kind of reset my media bay to find out. But give that a try and just search by the plugin name, and I think all the other instruments will load up as well, so you don't always have to go into Hallion 6 to do the browsing. All right, so we had a question earlier about coloring within the mix console. Let me see if we can. So let's say if we have our project open here and we have our mix console about adding, with 2 questions on coloring. So we'll kind of address these at the same time. So if you wanted to change the color directly within the mix console, you could just go to the right here. Of like the mix console name, you'll see a little arrow pop up, and then you can change the color there. So that's one way of doing it. You could also select it here. So say if you go into your properties, so let's say we go to this particular, the selected channel here, and let's make this like a blue color, so you could do it there. So if you just kind of click directly to the right there. Now there's another question asking if we could do this, like make all drums blue. Let me just reread the question, make sure I'm understanding it correctly. All right, so just rereading some questions here with some more questions coming in. All right, so I think we might be able to do this. Let's see if we could do it in the project logical editor. Okay, so I'm just going to do a new project here. Okay, so let's say I want to do 4 background vocals. All right, so it looks like we could do it. So adding colors based on different naming nomenclatures. So it's a great question. So I went to the Project Logical Editor and I chose name. And then we could say equal or contains or doesn't contain. It's kind of a Boolean context. And let's say I want it to be Vox or drums or guitar or bass. Then we could choose here set color, and we could choose set to fixed color. At this point, if I want it to be color 2, and at that point I could just hit apply, and you can see it changed the colors just like that. So it's a really interesting question, and I'm glad I figured out a solution for it. So, but this is kind of a task where the Project Logical Editor really can, do these types of tasks, these really kind of obscure, kind of conditional based elements, so that, so once again, open from the Edit menu from the Project Logical Editor. At this point, we want to choose in the filter target, name. So basically we define the condition. The name contains Vox. And then we're going to choose set color. And then you can set it to fixed color. And then here, these colors, and these colors you'll actually see are these colors laid out here. So let's say I want to go to color 12. And you could add your own colors. Then I just hit apply, and it went through and basically found every track with the word Vox in the name and set it to that particular color. So I think that'll do the trick for you. If not, just let us know in the comments field. All right, so you see we have a question, how long does a Hangout continue? We usually try to aim for 2 hours, but sometimes we go longer. We try to go through as many of the questions as we can. All right, so I had a question on Very Audio. Is it possible to use the pen into the waveform? It's not really set up where the pen can do that. Let me switch projects here just so we can jump here, activate this project so we have some vocal material. All right, so I'm just going to open up the Very Audio and let's say do a quick analysis. So the pen doesn't work for kind of drawing in vibrato, but you can kind of, tame it in a lot of ways by, the straighten pitch with that. And some people don't realize that in the Very Audio, you could also just kind of double click and create kind of an anchor point where it'll only do it directly from there. So there's a lot of ways to really kind of get the same result, but not using the pen itself within the Very Audio editor. All right, so we're seeing comments that not every plugin works reliably in JBridge. It's probably going to be your best solution overall. There's sometimes you could always, get in touch with the plugin manufacturers and see if they'll do a 64-bit version. It's been out for, 10 years now. But I realize some plugins and some companies just aren't necessarily around anymore. But, at some point it gets out of our responsibility if certain third-party plugins, never get updated. Okay, so we had a question on render in place with like a Hallian Sonic SE. And rendering kind of unused tracks and empty tracks. All right, so I'll add 2 more MIDI tracks. I'll do some 21st century composition here. All right. And I'll say I'll just copy this. Okay, so when you do kind of rendering, often it's going to be based on the number of outputs that are visible. So if I wanted to come here, let's say I have these routed to my different outputs. So as soon as I want to, let's say, go to my mix, we'll just route these to out 2 and out 3. So now I only have 3 of the outputs routed. Now when I render in place. So I think you have to be cognizant that when you want to do this, let's say with current setting, I'll just do it with effects. So you can see that you just kind of now turn that directly into audio. But just be cognizant that, if you have, when you render it, you may just want to have the specific outputs enabled, disabled appropriately before you do the rendering. So instead of opening up all the outputs, it's kind of an odd workflow, I'll grant you. But just be cognizant that depending on how many outputs you have, that's how many will be rendered if you're doing it with effects. So. All right, just reading through some questions here. Sorry for a delay. All right, so we had a quick use of chord pads. People asked for that, so let me just jump back to our project. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but I know some people come in and out. Okay, so I just have my virtual keyboard loaded up here, and let's say I have it to go to a string sound. I'll just revert this very quickly. Okay. So here I have the chords that were extracted from the piano part, and then I assigned the chord pads from the chord track. So let's say like I'm a bass player and I'm not a great keyboard player, and I know I should practice and all that good stuff, but it's just not my primary instrument, never will be. But you know, it could still be musical. So now if I wanted to come here and just trigger these different chords, let me just play, get this sound loaded up here. So what the chord pads will allow me to do is to just kind of come here and play. So let's say I'll turn on my click track, and I just want to come up with different chord ideas, and I wanted to sequence them. So at this point, you could just literally just kind of play in the chords. So as we do this, let me just at that point you could just see that the chords will be played in real time. So you could just play back and you could hear it. I'm not sure why I'm not hearing the chords right now, but that's really all you have to do. So it's a performance mechanism. And now to be able to come over here also and just say, we may have had a fade out. So if I just want to come here, and now I could just and then if you wanted to play the individual notes within the chords, just to kind of, again, you could just come and activate sections. And once you have sections turned on, I could play these notes. And you can see I'm just hitting one note to trigger the chord. And if I hold down these four notes here, they're right next to each other. So I could switch the chord. And play it. And I'm just doing this all from my computer keyboard without a MIDI keyboard hooked up doing that. So it kind of allows you to play parts if you don't have a MIDI keyboard, or kind of take a different approach to different instruments. So those are some of the uses of the chord pads. Okay, so we had a question. Let's say if we have a drum part, how to extract just D2 to a particular note. There's a couple ways that we could do this. I'm just going to do a new project, and let me just load up quick Vst Instrument here real quick. We'll do some drums. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to actually just I had a quick MIDI drum recording here. So in this case, I'm just going to have Groove Agent spit out MIDI data, and then when I hit record, we'll have this sync and follow the transport. So we select a pattern. All right, let me just see if I have. Okay, so let's come here, have it follow the transport. Let's see if I may not have loaded the patterns. Okay, now it's probably make a little more sense. And my Cubase didn't like that, so we'll try it again. Sorry, about 40 projects open. Let's relaunch it. Sorry about that. All right, so we'll do this again. Okay, so now, so all right, so let's reset my outputs here real quick. Sorry about that. Excuse me. All right, so now we have better control over the volume. So let's say we just have this going on. All right, so let's say we're here and recording our drums. All right, I want to set my input here to Groove Agent SE. All right, so let's say if I come here. Now, one of the cool things you can do with Groove Agent stuff is actually create the drum map from the instrument. So if we look at this, we can say we're going to have our kicks or snares, let's say. So let's say I wanted to take my D2 and extract it out. So I think we could actually just do this with the logical editor in MIDI. So there's two different approaches to this. So if I wanted to, so one, you saw that I created a drum map from the VST3 instrument. So, but now if I wanted to extract, let me just, I think it's D1. So I wanted to extract the pitch D1 out of that. So if I go to Under MIDI, there's a logical editor here. So we'll say type is equal to note. And we can say value 1, which is going to be the pitch, is equal to D1. And what we want to do is to extract. So now we have our D1s here. I could just take that, and if I did it correctly, it's now just automatically taking and extracted the D1s out of this part into this other newly created track. So again, I went to the MIDI menu, to the logical editor. We wanted to say the type is equal to note, and then we need to define what that pitch is. So value 1 of a MIDI message would be pitch, value 2 velocity, value 3 release velocity, etc. And we wanted that to be equal to D1. And we told what to actually do here. Instead of deleting, transforming, inserting, we just extracted that and then hit apply, and you could save that as a preset. So now if I go into this part, we're not going to see any pitches on D1 because they've all been extracted out into the other part. Now, something that people may not realize is, let's say if you wanted that snare to go to a different part, all you'd have to do is, once you have the drum map defined, and again, you saw that we could just define the drum map automatically. If you kind of move this window over to the right, you could also just say, I wanted this particular instrument not to go out of the track, but you could also choose to remap it as well. So if you say, okay, I wanted this to go to a different track output, let me just see if I have this. But here you could choose different outputs as well. So on a particular, so once there's a drum map defined, you could also have independent outputs and ports routing, or you could just extract it using the logical editor. All right, so we had this question from earlier, but it's like how to audition sound. Let me just read it so I get it correct here. How to audition content in Media Bay without having to disable control room, please. So when you do the, if you don't hear sounds in Media Bay, so let's say if I come here and I just wanted to go through different drum loops, this information is always going to be routed through the Media Bay. So let's say if I just want to come here to drum loops. So if I don't have Media Bay enabled here, so, and I'll test it just to make sure it hasn't changed. So as soon as I come here to my VST connections, what you want to do is to make sure, so I'm going to just make sure that my outputs are set up here and not in my Media Bay. So here it's not going to be routed. It's going to only go through the Media Bay, I believe. I'll just check one more thing. In my VST connections. So it's you have to have the Media Bay enabled. And again, you could just set your main outputs, define like a stereo output or 5.1 if you're doing that, and set it to not connected. And then just route your Media Bay here, and then all of your different loops can be auditioned, and that's run through Media Bay. So I don't know of a way to change that. So, but it's really easy to kind of get set up. I think if you have versions of Cubase without Media Bay, it's not the case. Okay. We had a question. I installed Alan Morgan drum sounds, and when I bought installed automatically found new kits, but can't necessarily find the MIDI files. So sometimes I'm not sure which drums they were, but when you go to and you buy third-party content, some of them will come with kits, and some may not come with content. I think most of them kind of come with content these days. Let me just click on the right button here. So let's say if I have and the one thing, and you may notice I did this earlier by accident, when you go to load content, within Groove Agent, one of the things you may want to do is if you could load the kit, but I always choose to right click on the agent here and load the kit with the patterns. So at that point, those two will be kind of linked together, so you could just try out kind of different patterns. So make sure that you're not just loading the kit, but within the instrument, try loading the kit with patterns and see if that makes a difference. Okay, we have a question. Do you have to use the chord track while using chord pads? No, you don't have to. Sometimes they're often linked together by nature, but they can function independently. So you could just play. So within the chord pads themselves, if you have no chord track, you still have the ability to come here and to define the chords without a chord track being present. So at this point, if you just kind of just click here on the left hand side, you'll see a little arrow for the chord pad, and then that will pull up a definition, so you can kind of see that and be able to kind of audition it, so you can have a better sound loaded up than drums to do it with. But so you could have the chord pads, output data, audition different chords without a chord track being present. All right, so you see question. I'll just move the mic here without hopefully killing everyone. All right, so there's a question. Why is there no mixer on top in Cubase 8.5? It was there in 7. It's hugely important to me. Again, one of the things you could try to do is to use the workspaces. So I know it's kind of a different approach, but I think if you use the workspaces, you could have your workspaces key command defined to do the same exact thing. So really kind of explore some of the workspaces. And now obviously with 9, we have the mixer always docked in the bottom of the screen, so we have the mix console always present there. So let's see, another question. Is it possible to change multiple tracks in automation a threshold point? Just reading one other comment here real quick. Okay, so let's say if we have automation, let me just remove these tracks. Get this mic set back in. Okay, so let's say we have automation going on. Let's just come here. I'll just link these channels, do a quick link. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to reread a question, make sure I'm understanding it. I'm not sure if I totally get the question. Is it possible to change multiple tracks in automation, say a threshold point? Yeah, so I mean, you could just kind of select your automation tracks here, and I think you could do this again with the Project Logical Editor. So let's go over here to the Edit, to the Project Logical Editor. And I think there might even be some presets for automation. So I think, depending on what you want to do, I'm not sure when you say threshold, but you could probably do a number of different things. So here, if I wanted to just, take my automation and kind of trim it down 10%, you could do stuff like that as well. So try playing again with the Project Logical Editor, and I think that might help you out with the automation. All right, let's go back to some other questions. Thanks, everyone, for your patience. All right, so we had a couple. I see we have, hi, Greg. I need to connect my external MIDI instrument, Alesis SR18, to my UR22, but I can't. How can I do that? So if one thing, and I'm not sure if I saw some discussion threads on this, but make sure that you have a MIDI connection from the UR22, so the output going directly to the input. If you're synchronizing patterns inside of Cubase, you may need to have both MIDI in and out. So out going to in going to out from your SR18 to Cubase, and then when you do that, you may need to have a mixer connected to hear the audio from the SR18. So make sure that you have a way of hearing it. Some people can connect it into the audio interface and record it. That's one way of doing it. So, but the MIDI and audio will be kind of separate, and that's why a lot of people kind of like having the capability of virtual instruments. But if you still have questions on that, Felipe, just kind of enter it again in the comments field. So let's go. We had a question on sampler track. So let's say if I'm here, just go to my media bay, and I just want to find some sounds. Okay, so let's say if I want that into my sampler track, I could just right click and say create sampler track from that. And then we're going to have the sampler track created here. Now, as soon as we've done that, if I wanted to save a track preset, I believe we would just right click here and say save track preset. So we'll call this test sampler. We'll just call it May 1st, May 1 hang out. Okay, so we hit OK. Let's do a new project. So I just typed in May 1 Hangout, and then when I load that up, the sampler track is automatically created and could be, so once you save it as a track preset, it could be recalled in any other project. Now I saw some other questions kind of regarding this. So we'll go to activate this project. About if you have just a large part of, let's say we have a sample here. Now, one of the things that's handy is if you actually are doing editing. So let's say if I just want to take just a range of that audio there. One of the things that a lot of people don't know, we'll go to the editor, inspectors, let's say for the editor here. Okay, so let's say I just have this part selected and I go to my edit tab, and then we go to, I want to go to my range. We'll take this and I'll just take that range. And now I could choose create sampler track from the range. And we'll just blow this up just a little bit. So let me just try it one more time. I'll try just a very short range here. So, you know, it will take just, you know, so if you wanted to just take just a portion of the sample, you know, you could just simply take this one little file here. And if you wanted to, you know, bounce selection, you could have that automatically just be just a small portion of the audio file instead of the whole file that's being referenced. But the sample track can be saved independently of the project. Now, I saw that another question, kind of since we're here dealing with presets, someone asked if we could take like a track preset that's going into and save it with groups. So I'm just going to save all these tracks here. Let's remove this. So I want to remove selected tracks. And let's say if I have a drum loop, let's say I have a drum loop here. And let's say if I have this routed through groups, So let's say I want to take that track and let's add a group channel. And let's add an effect send too. So let's say we'll add a little verb. All right, so what I want to do now is select this. And so the question was, you know, kind of saving routing and effect sends with a particular track here. So now what I want to do is we'll select this and go to our sends. But let's also route it to a group. So we'll add a group channel. And let's route this particular channel to our group channel. And we can do it a couple different ways. And let's say I just want to run EQ, something obnoxious like this. All right, so if I wanted to save this combination and call it up, what you could do is export a track archive. So if I come here, we could export selected tracks. Okay, so I'll copy this over and I'll just put it into my WAV files here. Just create a new folder. Let's say to my desktop. Okay, so now if I do a new project, if I did this correctly, we can now import the track archive. And now it's still being routed through the effects end as well as the group channel. So while it's not a track preset, you can save all those things together very easily using track archives as opposed to a track preset. All right, go through some more comments that come in. So we had a question, is there a way to have the automation follow kind of the track colors? Or have it as a set color as opposed to the track colors? Let's take a quick look. I don't know, but it could be under preferences. I think they might be linked in Cubase. Let me just take a quick look. Yeah, I don't know a way of having the automation being kind of a separate independent color. So I'll play around with it some more. All right, let's take a look at some of our questions. All right, so we had a question on bypassing sends and inserts on particular sends and EQs on tracks. Okay, let me just give this a try. I think there's a quick way in the mix console to bypass different components. And just load up some plugins here. Okay, so I think you could quickly bypass the EQs by Alt-Shift in your console and just selecting EQ like that, and also just Alt-Shift for quick control. So you could bypass your inserts and EQs when exporting just very quickly, kind of like that. So that's a quick, easy way to do it just within the mix console. So just kind of select all channels and 2 mouse clicks to do. All right, going through some of our questions. All right, so we had a question on saving and organizing kind of mixer templates, or kind of like a mixer view. So let's say, we had our EQ. Let me just, I had everything set up, and let's say I really liked how this was set up. Let's say I'm doing a band, and all of a sudden everything is just wonderful. You'll see this little, if you select all the channels, you could actually just come right click here and say save selected channels. And we could call this, mix, try 1 if you want. And then let's say if I come here, I've completely ruined everything I did in my mix console. And let's say if I go to my EQ, I have that all set. I could now select my channels here. And then from here, we'll say we could actually load selected channels. And then you're back to where you were. So, so there's this little drop down menu there. So that's where you can load and save different mixer channel settings right there. So there's a question, is anyone else getting the Cubase has stopped working message when shutting down 902? I'm still on Windows 7, wondering if there's something missing or setting that could stop this from happening. Most of the time when I've seen that kind of on exiting the program, it's like a plugin that's still kind of hanging on to memory. So it could be a plugin that's actually particular cause of a lot of those issues that's kind of not releasing memory. So just go through some more questions here that were sent in. We're going to wrap up pretty soon. We're going for about 2.5 hours, I think. So we'll just see if there's more questions that were on the list here. So there's a question on when zoomed in, if I tried to move in a chunk of sliced audio close to each other, the mouse tool changes to resizing and I can't move them. So there's a good chance maybe that you're accidentally, if you hit the one key on the QWERTY keypad, you'll notice that the mouse tool will change the different options. So make sure that you're not just hitting the one key accidentally. And I think that's probably maybe what's causing your issue. So. Okay, let me just look. See, does anyone have just a super quick question? We'll go over some more stuff on our next hangout. Last time we had a lot of people that wanted a WaveLab specific hangout, so we're thinking of doing that perhaps on May 15th. So we're trying to do 2 hangouts a month. They seem to be popular. But so that'll be something I think we're aiming for May 15th. If you subscribe to the WaveLab channel or to the Steinberg Facebook page, you could do that. Let me just check a couple. If you have just a really quick last minute question, I'm sorry that we didn't get to every single question, but we got through a lot today. Just if you have just a quick question, please feel free to type it in the comments field. And we'll just wait a second and see if there's a read through some more comments. I see people wanting a Halligan 6 hangout. We could do that as well. People wanted also just a Groove Agent 4 hangout. So we may do WaveLab, Groove Agent 4, and then maybe Halligan 6. Okay, so real quick, audio quantize how to. So depending on the audio file, there's a number of different approaches to it. So let's say if I just want to take. So if I have this and it's a generic drum loop here. And let me just solo this so we're not playing on top of our other drum loop. And we'll have it not follow the tempo so we can listen to the original. Okay, so. Okay, so often what you want to do, especially with like drum loops, is to, if you go into the sample editor at this point, or you could actually just double click, and I like to find the hit points. And then you could adjust a threshold. Kind of match the material here. So let's say you want that, and then you could create your slices. Then at this point, let's say we just wanted our quantize preset. And you could choose to do kind of audio warp, which will stretch, or you could actually Just kind of say, okay, I want this to be quarter notes. Select the events here. Or let's say if I wanted more percentage based, let's say maybe eighth notes. At that point, you just kind of quantize, just make weird results. So, but you could also kind of audio warp it, but we could do more of that on kind of next hangout. Let's see if there's any other quick questions, but often just kind of working with slices and then quantizing the slices. All right, so we have this sliced audio here, or I'll just do it with this loop up here. So getting back to our last question about hit points, let's say all right, so let me just make sure I created the slices of this. Turn my snap off. Okay, so we'll do this as our last question. A quick way of like bumping up the volume of a word within like a vocal. Just jump back to this project here. Okay, so a little tip I could share with you on if you want to make like a vocal, like one word kind of pop out automation wise. One way is to just, literally come here. I know people that will cut each phrase and drop in, and just do kind of the clip gain automation. That's one way of doing it. But if you wanted to, let's say if we have automation here on the project, if you switch to the line tool, and then within the line tool, if you select a square wave, you can now, I think it's Control Shift or Alt Shift, or maybe Command Shift. At that point, let me just, so if you hold down Command Shift, you could say, okay, I just want to see this one little phrase pop up. Or I think it's Alt Shift on Mac, but if you just kind of do that, it'll just do kind of like a little volume bump or a volume drop, just kind of right there on that particular word for you. So So you could try that as well. All right, with that, we'll go ahead, and we've gone about 2.5 hours. So again, look for, if you subscribe to the WaveLab channel, we'll do just a WaveLab Hangout. We're looking at March 15th at this point. We have to wait for calendars to be set, but if you are subscribed to the Steinberg Facebook page, you can be notified there. I'd like to thank everyone from around the world that kind of hung out and watched. I hope everyone learned a tip or trick, and then we'll see you next time. Thanks everyone for the wonderful questions, and we'll answer some more questions. And again, if you have questions that you want submitted in advance, feel free to send them in advance as an email to clubcubase@steinberg.net. Once again, I hope everyone learned a couple tips and tricks, and we'll talk to everyone later. With that, we'll wrap up. And thanks again for everyone's participation. And we'll go ahead and stop the broadcast now. Thank you.